Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I hope that everybody had a good lunch break for both our in-person and virtual participants. Here in person, I saw lots of amazing conversations. I was able to connect with some folks, and was such a joy. So we're rounding into the very end of our event today, and I thank you all for still being here. I'm really excited about what we have coming up next, which is our final poetic interlude. This poetic interlude is very special. It was recorded for us by a man named Christopher Pressfield, who is a published poet who has been incarcerated for more than 40 years. He's a self-described American prison poet who was the author of numerous poems, including his book, Gray Air from Prisons, 1983 to 1999, which was published in 1999. The co-editors of Poet Lore, Judy Boltz and E. Ethelbert Miller, describe receiving Mr. Pressfield's poetry by saying, "His poems arrived in the mail, handwritten on lined paper." Mr. Pressfield recorded this poetic interlude for us in August 2023. We're going to go ahead and play it now.
My name is Christopher Pressfield, and I'm an American prison poet. I am also an editor and publisher of fine poetry from a variety of international artists, including Jimmy Santiago Baca, Maggie Jaffe, Sid Corman, Sharon Dubiago, John Taylor, Lucille Lang Day, and many more. I would like to thank the John Hay Library and the organizers of this symposium for the invitation to read the most recent iteration of the sequence, Elegies for the Fallen, which characterizes 44 years I've spent in 41 U.S. prisons and reformatories, all for nonviolent property crimes, except for one instance in 1974 when I escaped to Mexico for the summer. It seems worth noting that I began these 44 years of imprisonment on September 16, 1973, the same day that Victor Jara, the Chilean folk singer and political activist, was murdered by soldiers under the command of CIA-backed usurper Augusto Pinochet. Jara was shot exactly 44 times. McAllister Prison, the Big Top, 1973. The prison they call the circus was my initiation. Walls so tall the sun declined to challenge their authority. I'm told Berryman was inspired to say nothing, and yet it overshadowed his birthplace. A riot died down as I arrived, huge logging chains threaded through bars to keep the animals at bay. Fat siren painfully loud. "We knew it," Warden said, "when we smelled the smoke." Then he left with the rest of the clowns. Prison poet. In time, stone remains, and star falling as leaf to wind. Effortless desire. Sound a river of light and dark, spun to gray. Prisoner on AER. In memory of Hayden Carruth and in honor of Lee Poe. I took this weight, and yet limped through tunnels gray as steel or sky. I came in autumn during a downpour, my wound held tight and turned to wind. Heart therapy, its rhythm almost undetectable. Now I listen like an old man sick and lame in New York, agonizing over poems, as Tu Fu did on a mountaintop. My blood-liquored voice resounds down corridors. Thought lost, and everything light as air. Gray air. This air is close, wrapped over time as we are, wrapped in gray. It gives the ether philosopher's dreamt plank's length, the root of nature, how a man tongues static between crashes of thunder, how light grows a river of black and white, essential meaning, how departed becomes a mantra, a thing one breathes to live. It sifts into bone, colors the air. Prison blues. Inside the gray, great fish of American industry, you float like eye teeth on a night flight between California and the sea, between tonight and last night, as everything comes up blue, even the sound of your own breathing. Your arm hurts, melts into the surface of a poem about people trying to evade that total trade. Man, even Billie Holiday can't fade that. When you're inside a whale, falling deep, blue is all outdoors. California prison, no place, 1980. It's the size of a city, or at least a small town. No courthouse, however. That was decided when stakes were laid. No art supply store, no health bars, and no park, yet it's clear big plans were made. No maps by design, all paths were ordained well before arrival. 2 signs near the fence, no warning shots fired, and poet in residence. Fugitive by the Sea for Jimmy Santiago Baca. Just before 5 in the afternoon, he lies on his back in the middle of the yard, unfettered by fences, bars, the impediments of prison. Above the horizon, a hawk drifts on nimble physics, wheels through turquoise sky, a firebird of mind. Or perhaps he thinks a phoenix. Nearby, gulls kite on thermals, fugitives by the sea seeking food, litter, loot, all the loss they presume to find. Poems and wine. Travelers in the same cult of love, doggedly we killed oblivion off, wrote Dalton. I practice sailing in my cell, swoop and dive all over the place, reading the poems of Zvetevaya. Lightly it becomes a love affair, this thing between me and writing. Fierce images, wine on the wing. I'd have it no other way. I feel like hanging from the yardarm of my poetry whenever I desire. Surely they'll boot me out someday, shove me out without any oars, like Jean Valjean set on the sea, only poems and wine to survive. Morning rift. Outside the window, angles of light and miles of chain link, blue sky bearing down on it all, heavy with high desert snows. It fades quickly in the morning mist. There is little the muse can do. Still, there's a grip of ideas beyond everything, and amber lights like saucers circle the land, as I am reminded of fiction from another day, a dark age before the penitent could sing dirges of regret. This life, the walls say, is far too gray. In Gray, The Prison, 2013, after Lowell and Bishop. Gray-stained expanse floating over sea-storm surface, hard as hell and twice as useless. Painted runes encompass it. The only ones that matter as light and dark are shades of the perfect breath of solitude. Amid ennui enter voices from the past, shifting sounds of wonder from Boston and Brazil. Patricians come to serve the penitent. My mind's not right, he said, but few understood him. Liberty falling. Deep in the dark, winged amphitheater of time, as moments digress into hours, as days dissemble the heart, there and only there, as in no other mission of mind, I descend corridors reaching furthest down, deeper than anyone has fallen, further than a dying sun in revolution, a moon spinning out its last sanity, down and down into the bowels of a woman dead to her blindness, where forever we must dance and duel, well beyond the civil exposition, even to the gray shores of Lethe. How it is. The whole race is a poet that writes down the eccentric propositions of its fate, Wallace Stevens. They warrant me a life committed to gray meanderings, as if there are no other possibilities, as if only black stone exists in the Japanese rock garden of my soul. Borges claimed life as a flight, mine a province of oblivion, yours a thin guitar I've come to believe only the sea knows. And then I think only in our absence, as with the eye of a storm imagined, as in a vision of placid moments, birds riding thermals to a source unknown, while below bubbles from a whale's spout churn down the throat of the abyss, one flying like black stone, others like thin guitars.
Let's give one more round of applause to Mr. Pressfield in honor of his poetry. I want to point out that this is the only slide where we don't have a photograph for our participant, such as the erasure of those who have spent time in prison. There is not a photograph available online of Mr. Pressfield. He has mailed us a photograph, and when we receive it, we will update the conference material so that his photograph is presented with the rest of the participants. I also wanted to take a second to comment on what he said at the very beginning when he noted that his incarceration aligned with the moment when Victor Jara, a Chilean folklorist, was murdered in Santiago, Chile. And I thought that connection was so beautiful because I don't know if you know about Victor Jara's work, but he was really the soul of the revolution in Chile. And when Augusto Pinochet overthrew Salvador Allende, for whom my son is named, they rounded up the artists, and they rounded up the thinkers, and they rounded up the intellectuals, much like we've done here in this country, and they brought them to the National Stadium. The National Stadium became a makeshift prison. Victor Jara was tortured for many days. His final poem came out of that place, written somehow with a stub of a pencil on a tiny piece of paper with broken fingers. It was called National Stadium, where he lamented all of the people who were there with him. He lamented the struggle, but still he persisted. I was amazed to make that connection and think of the way that Christopher Pressfield and so many other poets and artists send their material out of prison, handwritten on paper. And some of that material is now beginning to make it to the archives. And I hope more and more of it makes it to the archives, not just here at Brown University, not just here in the United States, but internationally. With that, we're going to turn to our final panel. And as I introduce it, I'm going to ask our panelists to make their way up on stage. That would be incredible. We are ending this symposium the way we began it, in a very fitting way, focusing on the voices of women. Our final panel is titled Say Her Name, Gender, Justice, and Healing. It is moderated by Dr. Lisa Biggs, who is an incredible theater artist in her own right, a dear friend to the library, somebody who teaches me often about abolitionism, about hope for the future. She is also the John Atwater and Diana Nelson Assistant Professor of the Arts and Africana Studies here at Brown University. We have three wonderful and distinguished panelists: Sashi James, Director of Reimagining Communities for the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls; Gabriela Friday, who goes by Ella, a postdoctoral researcher in race and ethnicity here at Brown University; and Mrs. Susan Burton, founder of a New Way of Life Reentry Project. Welcome, panelists.
Thank you so much to Amanda, to Christopher West, to the entire library staff, all the folks who are here, the folks behind the scenes, for making this symposium over the last several days possible, and for your care of the Mumia Abu Jamal archive, as well as all of the emanations that have already come into and are emerging from it. As Amanda said, or someone said the first event, that there are very few places in which one can access the work of currently incarcerated people publicly. I mean, I think folks who know someone who has served time we have their letters, we have their drawings, we have pictures, we have email, we have memories of the phone calls. But to share those things with people beyond the family is a big deal. And so it is really wonderful that this collection is being carefully cared for and shared with the world, because carceral institutions, as we all know, are public institutions. They're public institutions, and yet they are largely invisible. The inner workings of those facilities are largely invisible, and because of the shame associated with the criminal justice system, those who have been impacted by them, be it the currently or formerly incarcerated person themselves, or the family that does the walk with them, if they have family to do that walk with them. It can be very hard to talk about those things. So though we know that today that there are, is it 75 million people in our country who have been directly impacted? And in a country of 325 million people, that means 1 in 5 of us. So there are many, many of us who are deeply knowledgeable and aware, either as survivors of the system, victims of it, victims and survivors of it, about what goes on. But having a public space to speak about it is something different. So I'm going to read. Actually, I want to do something a little different. I've been trying a new practice in my teaching that I want to invite us all into. I often come to class like this, and I do not do my finest work like this. But I heard Angela Davis, right before she stepped on stage, say that she always takes a minute to meditate. And I just wanted to not invite you into a meditation practice, but to take 1 minute to just put all the things down that you may have in your hand and to lean back into your chair with your, and if you want to, you can close your eyes. No one's going to come by and touch you. Or if closing your eyes doesn't feel right or comfortable, to just cast your gaze down. And for 1 minute, we will just sit in silence. I will keep the time so you don't have to worry about that. But I want to invite you to take 1 minute to connect with the breath, to notice the weight of your body, the support of the chair behind you, your feet planted on the ground, and the sound of your breath, the sound of this space, the sound of this building, and the sound of the world around us. And as we return to the space and this panel and this time to be together, to open your eyes, see what is ahead of you, see what is to the side, see what is above and below. And if you're able to also check out what's behind you. These are the kinds of conversations that can be deeply unsettling. And so I invite this moment of silence and stillness as a way of grounding. Part of my job today is to celebrate, acknowledge, uplift the panelists. So I'm going to begin with a detailed biography of each one of them. And then I have a few questions. And then I'd like to turn it to the audience. I'm not sure, is anyone on monitoring the Zoom for questions? Sorry, folks on Zoom. We'll do our best in here. So I'm going to start in the middle with Gabriella Elafride, a postdoctoral researcher duly appointed in the Watson Institute for International and Public Affairs and the Center for the Study of Race and Ethnicity at Brown University. Her areas of specialization include mass incarceration, women, gender, and sexuality studies, time and social theory, and social movements. She worked as a prisoners' rights advocate, community organizer, and researcher for her forthcoming book project, Weaponizing and Resisting Time. In it, she explores incarcerated women's relationship to and resistance of time in a rural upstate New York jail, where she has conducted 4 years of ethnographic advocacy. Friday received her PhD in sociology from Bingham University in 2022. Sashi James is the director of Reimagining Communities for Families for Justice as Healing and the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. She is a daughter of formerly incarcerated parents. Because of her experiences, she understands the trauma endured when a parent is separated from their child because of incarceration. This experience has inspired her to focus on imagining and implementing a world without jails, prisons, and police by organizing directly impacted people to build the infrastructure, hence reimagining communities. She launched the first basic income guaranteed program led by formerly incarcerated women. She advocates for clemency on the state and federal level and has worked in the National Council's 100 Women, 100 Day campaign, encouraging the immediate release of women who are elderly, survived and punished, and long-timers. Part of that clemency tour includes displaying quilts with the names of the state and federal women currently eligible for clemency. Sashi also oversees a partnership with the American Bar Association to train attorneys and coordinate representation for clemency petitions, and mobilizes college campuses to engage with communities impacted by incarceration. Her most important role, she writes, though, is as the mother of Katori Ray James and as the daughter of John and Andrea James. Susan Burton is a visionary, inspirational leader of the criminal justice reform movement, author of the award-winning memoir, and y'all need to come get this if you do not have it already, Becoming Miss Burton, and the founder of a new, wait, I got a hold for the photograph, hold on. And the founder of a New Way of Life Reentry Project. A New Way of Life's approach to reentry is internationally recognized as an innovative model that creates welcoming and healing spaces for women to rejoin their communities after incarceration, while developing as leaders to work toward liberation. The impact of her work and leadership has been recognized through numerous awards. In 2010, she was named a CNN Top 10 Hero and received the prestigious Citizen Activist Award from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Come on, people. Come on. She is the recipient of the Encore Purpose Prize in 2012 and the James Irving Foundation Leadership Award, that was in 2014, among many, many, many more accolades. In 2018, Ms. Burton launched the SAFE, Sisterhood Alliance for Freedom and Equality, a housing network to replicate the effective and humane entry model that she pioneered. The network now includes 31 members located across the United States, Uganda, Nigeria, and Kenya. It is through this work that she thrives, enjoying the progress of her foundations, all the while knowing how many individual lives she has touched and changed throughout her own journey. And can I say that she recently celebrated a birthday? Happy birthday. Yes. Can you help me welcome our panelists to the stage, please? Well, I can't thank you all enough for joining us today and to really returning this question that began the symposium about the role of women in the work. But to begin, I mean, I know I've read a bio of each one of you, but I was wondering, could you tell us a little bit about how you individually came to the work? Meaning not just, the first day that you picked up that opportunity or responded to that email or that phone call, but why is it important to you? What does it mean to you? Sashi, do you want to begin? I'm looking at you and you're down there, so yes. Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Happy.
And I'm so honored to be on this panel with you, Ms. Burton. You know, I look at you like an OG. And I even, before, when I got on the panel and the panelist was confirmed, my mom is Andrea. She's also an elder in the movement. I was like, Mom, are you sure this is okay? You sure you don't want to switch out? You get on the panel? She was like, if you don't go get on the panel. So I'm grateful for you. I'm a daughter of formerly incarcerated parents. My dad went to prison when I was 6 months. He did 12 years, so I feel like I was born into this work. And even though it took me a long time to find my avenue, because of the obstacles that incarceration causes to our families and the systematic racism and just what communities like mine that are over incarcerated and under resourced have, it was hard to really become politically aware and actually find my voice in the movement. But I feel like just having parents that were formerly incarcerated, you know, my dad did 12 years, and then when my little brother was 6 months, my mom did 18 months. She was sentenced for 24 months, but she did 18 months. And I was in college my first year of college. My little sister was 14. My oldest sister was in California. But just seeing the harm that it even caused right now up into this day with my little brother and my mother serving 18 months. And we were really fortunate because we had my dad as the anchor who was like nursing my little brother and visiting my mom every single weekend. Even if it was 3 days, a 3-day weekend, he went Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, and he made sure that we got what we needed. But just seeing the trauma of that separation as an adult. And then my mom, she was an attorney, so when she came home, she was like, oh hell no, you know, we're not free until we're all free. And like, you know, talking about ending mass incarceration, but really not talking about the women that were incarcerated, not talking about the grandmothers, the daughters, and how we're at a 700% increase of incarceration, and like we're the fastest growing population in the prison system. And then I'll never forget when my mom went to prison, I was normalized, and it's always a joke because my sister graduated from Spelman. My older sister, she went to some college, and I dropped out in senior year, and I was like, I'm not going back. But you know, I was always the one that was just all over the place. I was always a child. My dad always had to come bail me out. I remember my little brother had nail clippers, like, we're gonna break Sashi out. I'm like, oh boy. But now it's like, when my mom left, I was like, it's okay because I'm gonna be there soon. And when my mom came home from prison with this mindset of ending incarceration of women and girls and thinking about how we could free our sisters and there's a better pathway, and thinking about how we've been brainwashed to rely on 911 or rely on incarceration as a response to harm, it's like we deserve so much better. And so that's why I'm so honored to be the director of Reimagining Communities, because I really feel like as an individual, I'm like a perfect example of what different looks like, because I was on a pathway to be inside of a prison, and now I'm on a pathway to make sure that not one more girl goes to a prison, and also on a pathway to create a community where women have a safe community to come home when we fight for them to come home. And so that's why I do this work, and that's what brought me here.
Thank you so much.
So I think I kind of came into this work from the perspective of not knowing what the heck was really happening. I was like a naive grad student, and I started working with the Black Student Union at my previous institution, and they had a youth visitation program. And I was like, you know, yes, like they invited me, they said, let's do this. And so I ended up starting to go visit and work with incarcerated youth, and it was really a humanizing project for me because I didn't know what I thought about it, but I knew that I was like, I don't know about this, you know? It wasn't the most comfortable thing for me. And then going in, I was like, these are just kids. Like, what's going on? Granted, when I say kids, it's a little loosely because they were like 13 to 21. But we were playing spades. We were playing shooting hoops. We were talking about real discussions about family and life. And it kind of just made me realize that some of these notions that we're all kind of ingrained with and that I had ingrained in myself weren't true, you know, and some of these thoughts that I had about incarcerated people that were more subconscious started to come to the forefront. And I'm like, well, why do I feel this way? Have I really actually spent enough time to understand what's going on in these spaces that has allowed for them to be incarcerated? And then from there, my advisor invited me to start doing work at the local jail, and I partnered with an abolitionist organization named Justice and Unity in the Southern Tier. And from there, I started working with women and quickly became their women's issues coordinator. And just all of the atrocities and immoral spaces that the women face inside the jail, from dealing with voyeurism, from pregnant women not receiving their proper treatment or medication or dietary needs, to just people not even being able to speak and see their family members as long and as often as they'd like to, it became very evident to me that these are immoral spaces that we have allowed to permeate our society, that these are spaces where we are actively allowing people to slowly die. And from there, I kind of just went all the way down the rabbit hole, I guess. Like, started organizing with Just, which is the shorthand for the organization I worked with, doing protests, trying to hold elected officials accountable, doing lawsuits against the jail that we were successful in a few and not in others, as well as forming mutual aid projects such as the Book of the Month Club or Toys for Tots Drive during the holidays to make sure like children of incarcerated people actually get presents since their family is currently incarcerated. And now it's kind of become both a research and personal practice that I kind of engage with. So
Thank you.
So first, I want to thank Sashi for answering the call. As I have these birthdays, you know, I know that we need the next generation to come in, step up, and continue the work to end mass incarceration, and just to make the world a better place. So I'm honored and deeply touched. I'm kind of batting back tears to see you, my friend's daughter, sharing this space with me. And I want to thank Brown. The conference, the symposium has been just electric. And the fact that the audience has engaged, the way the audience has engaged is very, very different. All right. It's very, very different and really, really engaging. So I came to this work, it was a must. You know, I'd had challenge, you know, I was born into poverty, a little girl in the project, so I had challenges all my life. And I learned to weather them. And I had a son. He was 5 years old. His name was KK. And one day he was accidentally killed by an LAPD detective. And I just could not handle any more harm, any more hurt, and any more pain to that degree. And I began to drink. And there should have been, and there could have been something different for me. But there wasn't. There was liquor stores, churches, and then came crack to our neighborhood. I drank to drown the grief. It escalated to drug use. And for the drug use, I was imprisoned. For the next 20 years, I was in and out of prison like a ping pong ball. And then I found help about 5 miles down the highway. So I lived in South LA. About 5 miles down the highway is a beach community called Santa Monica. It was a wealthy community. And in that community, I found what I'd always needed. I found therapy. I found AA meetings. I found mental, dental, medical services, all the things that should have been in South LA, but were in Santa Monica. It was like a buffet of wellness. And I ate everything. And I got better. And I got stronger. And then I began to look around and say, what is this? Why here is there so much and nothing in South LA? And from there, I picked up my service kind of cap. So, and from there, the advocacy cap. And, I worked, I saved my money, and I got a little house, and I called it a new way of life. And I'd go down to the bus station where my friends were getting off the bus, where we all got off the bus to start a life totally unprepared from Skid Row, Los Angeles. And I would meet my friends and I would say, girl, I have a house. Come on over. I found a new way of life. There's a bed there for you. And that's what started a new way of life. So that's where it began, because I figured, I found something I'd never had in my lifetime. In Santa Monica, I was safe. I never knew what it felt like to be safe, to be resourced, to be cared for. And I wanted to provide that to the other women who were coming back to the community, totally unprepared, to restart their lives. We spend $182 billion a year to incarcerate folks in this country. And we literally boot them back to the community, whether it's 2 years, 5 years, or 44 years, with nothing. And, say go at it. No IDs, no nothing. So I started a new way of life, and it flourished, and I flourished. We were a community of women, helping women, sharing resources, laughing together, eating together, going to meetings together, crying together, and healing together. And we all got stronger. We all got better. And none of us returned to prison.
I think part of the reason thank you all for sharing your stories of your journey. It's such an honor to be here with you today. I'm probably there's gonna be a bunch of crying over here, so I'll just let you all know. But I think it occurred to me, that the symposium began with this question about what's the role of women in this, or why are so many women involved in the effort to transform the criminal legal system? And Angela Davis, I think, said something like, we've always been here, we just didn't get the props or recognition. That is true. I was also thinking that part of under that question is also a question about what's changed since, at least for me, since Mumia was arrested and convicted and sent away almost 50 years ago. And the stories that you have shared are part of that big narrative, that in the last 50 years, the number of women behind bars has grown over 700%. And that's arguably an undercount in terms of Black women, where it's closer to, at the height, before there was a court case in California that demanded California end overcrowding. And then some people also got released because of COVID. But at the height, around 2015, the number of Black women behind bars between 1970 and 2015 grew over 832%. Yeah. That is not an accident. But in the narrative about the last 50 years in mass incarceration, women's experiences, the impact of those public policy decisions is often erased. Instead, it gets buried under this narrative, used as I think Angela Davis or Johanna Fernandez mentioned about the cop killer. And that story that was used in order to lock Mumia and so many Black activists away also ushered in mass incarceration, which has so many new public policy decisions make was designed and has been doing exactly what it was designed to do. But at the time, were people thinking about women? No, not maybe directly, but as time has gone on and innovations in the thinking from the 70s have changed, gender-neutral policing policies have impacted who gets locked up. And women, unfortunately, we get disproportionately locked up for nonviolent crimes related to property, for sex work, so doing sex work in order to survive poverty, and for problematic substance use. Oh, that's not everybody who's behind bars, but a disproportionate number of us are. For those things, incarceration doesn't solve poverty. It doesn't solve chronic substance use. It doesn't solve police brutality. It just locks more and more people away. And but there's a big story that it solves that it works. It provides safety. It's a mechanism of justice. I wanted to ask you all, how can sharing stories that speak from and to the experiences of incarcerated folk really help us move toward more just and more kind systems or ways of being in the world? I mean, your example is it's such a beautiful example of how asking deep personal questions about what do I need and what do people I know need, and then being determined to do the work and create networks in order to build those things can shift the outcomes for so many people. But part of that is also like, I imagine in your process of healing, like learning a new story about oneself and about one's community. You said you engaged in like a political awakening as you were on your journey toward healing. So yeah, forgive me, I'm a playwright. So, and I've really been thinking a lot about how we use story in order to justify public policy. So to put it another way, how can stories that speak to and from the experiences of incarcerated folks really help us move this dialogue? There are so many things that people need and we are not getting. Do you want to hop in there, Ella? Okay.
So I think it was Johanna on the first day who said that carceral spaces are dehumanizing institutions and that sharing the stories and narratives of incarcerated people humanizes them. I mean, even for myself, as I kind of told a little bit how I came to this, like it was through meeting with these people and seeing how much in common I had with a lot of them and how much closer in common I was than further distance I was, that made me realize that there's really something corrupt with this system, that there's something morally wrong with this system. Like one of the first women I met with, just hearing her talk to me and like we're laughing, talking about James Patterson books or things that we did as kids that we probably shouldn't have done, or just having all of these like very fun but also profound discussions about life. And I kind of just started seeing the sameness, like a mirror standing right in front of me. And so I think through sharing the stories, like we do basically two things. One, that people we've deemed as the ills of society deserve our empathy, but also that no one deserves to live in such unsafe and unjust conditions. Simply put, the more we share the stories and narratives of people impacted by incarceration, the more people realize the systems that we are working within are immoral and not working. So I think that's, at least for me, what the importance of sharing people's narratives and why when I do try to write on some of the women I've worked with, I try to share their stories in depth and let their words speak for themselves, because they have such profound things to share with us, and we just need to be able to listen more and make this as part of a humanizing project.
Storytelling, I imagine it's a big part of your advocacy work. Sashi, I'm looking at you down there.
Yeah. So I feel like we're in a space right now that when we talk about incarceration, when we talk about the harms of incarceration, like the stories are already there. So we don't have to continue to ask folks for their story because like if you listen to the land, you know why people are going to be incarcerated or you know what is leading people to incarceration. And so for me, it's like really listening to the needs of what people want, you know, and then uplifting the work that is actually being done in the community to create change and start right in the root of the neighborhood. So for me, it's like I watch, as I said, I'm not formally incarcerated. I'm a daughter of formerly incarcerated parents, and I've been in and out of jail. But when I watch my mom tell her story, or even when I watch Miss Burton tell her story, you know, that pain is like we're continuing to relive that pain every time we tell our story. And it's like we don't need you to keep going back to that harm because that can be triggering for you. So we want to figure out like what can we create that is like all about healing and moving forward from the harm that we have gone through. So as an organization with the National Council, we've been really intentional about not forcing folks to tell their story, but really say, okay, what do you need? So that way you didn't have that story, right? And moving forward there. And so I think storytelling is important, but we have decades of stories from our elders, our ancestors. We have all that laid out, that blueprint. And now it's time to create the blueprint, to create change and figure out how do we not have to have the repeated cycles of harm that our ancestors and our elders have gone through already. So that way our children don't have to go through that. And so, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I mean, it says to me, and Ms. Byrne, I'm gonna let you absolutely answer this, but it says to me that also in the last 50 years that the stories have been told and somebody has heard them. Because definitely in the 70s and the 80s, I mean, part of the war on drugs is creating this mythology about crack hoes and cow killer Black rapists running around in order to shut down the demands of civil rights and Black power organizing. I mean, it's a storytelling, like, you know, PR campaign in order, and this is where we are, you know, like the Panthers are able to stage these critiques about police brutality, and what would we get hit with on the other end of the pendulum is that, nope, the police are good. We need to be afraid of these killer activists. Nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, most police officers, if people know this, or if you don't know this, most police officers, they never pull their weapon their entire career. And the few people who wind up actually getting killed are more likely to be killed by, unfortunately, committing suicide. And then there's a number also who are killed in traffic accidents. They are not killed in confrontations with anybody. And the people who are killed, that should not have happened. I don't believe that anybody, you know, I don't want people to die. But the myth and the story that's been told is a powerful one about the raging Black criminal. But you're saying that that organizers like yourself have reached a point where you feel confident that people know about the lies that are circulating about us.
I think that Sasha and the National Council has an approach to meet people's needs.
Yes.
And to actually support them in the areas that they need to be supported in. I know your mom sent gift cards to some of the women who had served long sentences, and as a gesture of kindness and support, she mailed them gift cards to A New Way of Life. So it's meeting the need. I mean, every woman coming home wants a decent pair of panties and bra. You know, that's just a automatic, right? So, you know, I think that all of us, every last one of us, we have some role to play and something that's important to contribute to this change that we're seeking, to ending mass incarceration, to making our communities safe, livable, enjoyable for everybody. and for everybody. I think we all have something to contribute. There's no, yeah, I mean, I guess it's like the soup, right? So there's some onion and celery and tomatoes and to make up this beautiful, wonderful soup. So I wrote a book to tell my story. I wrote the book out of almost a desperation for people to know who incarcerated women were. I wrote the book to let them know that, we have agency, we have intellect, we have potential. What we lack most of the time is opportunity. I put an extraordinary effort to create a new way of life. It's something I would not ask anyone to have to do, but I had to do it to make the change I needed to see. I needed to make sense out of what had happened to my life. My son dies, I get criminalized, I get degraded, I get dehumanized, and I think, what's wrong with me? Why am I such an undeserving person? And it gets internalized until I met Santa Monica. And I understood that there was nothing wrong with me. There's something wrong with the world who throws people like me away,
That's right.
that locks us up, suppresses, almost just rape our everything and leave us to just disappear as if we don't matter. I had a birthday on Wednesday, and I came in. Prior to coming, I contacted a local detention center to come in and spend my birthday with the women who were locked up. And I sent them a copy of my book, and I let them know that they matter. I let them know that they're important. I asked them to keep dreaming and don't let people put their light out, that this was just an experience. It didn't define them. And I wish them, happiness and success upon release. And let them know if they write me, I'd write them back. And that's what I wanted to do for my 72nd birthday.
I
And it
thought you was
good.
21.
So, it's just so crazy what we do to people and what we miss out on as a society. The talent, the intellect, and sometimes it's harmed and misguided. But I bet you it wouldn't take $182 billion to get the best out of the majority of our incarcerated population.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to ask you all, picking up on Sashi's insight about and the many of the things that you all have said about what can we do to support people who are incarcerated, but also a question about how they are already affecting change. But along the way, I just because I love Ms. Burton's book, I just wanted to read. I'll let you all pick up a copy yourself, but I'm just going to read us some of the epilogue moments to give you a sense of the gravity. You have a sense of the gravity of the situation, but I think her book is a beautiful source of so much knowledge and wisdom. The majority of incarcerated women are mothers of underage children. Over 40% of these mothers report that upon incarceration, they were the only parent in their household. It is estimated that as many as 94% of incarcerated women were victims of physical or sexual abuse. That's before they get to prison. Most women are behind bars for social or victimless crimes, while the real crimes, which the flawed system perpetuates, most women behind bars are behind bars for social or victimless crimes, while the real victims, which the flawed system perpetuates, are the children. The number of children under age 18 with a mother in prison has more than doubled since 1991. Approximately 10 million American children have or have had a parent in prison. Nearly 80% of women, formerly incarcerated women, are unable to afford housing after release. Most public housing authorities automatically deny eligibility to anyone with a criminal record. No other country deprives people of the right to housing because of their criminal histories. I hope that some of these just excerpts from the book begin to paint a picture of the needs of people behind bars and really of the needs of people on both sides of the prison door, because people were in need before they turned to problematic drug use, before they shoplift, before they engaged in sex work, or before, if there was a confrontation in which someone got hurt, before they pushed back, they took up arms, they knocked somebody out. There was a need that was not being addressed. That, I think, is something that each one of you has highlighted again and again and again, and again and again and again. And you all are experts on the needs of people on both sides of the prison door. Can you tell us a little bit more about how people who have been or are currently are incarcerated are affecting change and how we might support them? Do you want to start, Sashi? You're down there. Okay. We'll just keep moving this way.
I can start. So I'm based in Roxbury. That's where our headquarters is. And right now, for the last 3 years, there's been a plan to build a new $50 million women's prison. And we've derailed it for the last 3 years.
Yes.
So one of the last ways that we've been able to derail it was we wrote a prison and jail moratorium bill, which is a 5-year pause on all construction of prisons and jails, and then also demanding that the $50 million that they were going to spend on the new prison be spent in communities that would be impacted by that prison, which we know is predominantly the Black and Brown community. And we have that mapped out too in the statistics if they want to challenge us. But anyway, what was so beautiful is that last year in the first session, we actually passed it in Massachusetts, which is like a really racist state on all levels. And so we were able to pass it, and Governor Baker, who's the former governor, vetoed the bill. And immediately when he vetoed the bill, they introduced a proposal to build a $21 million youth jail. So it was just ironic. And so we introduced the bill again into session in January because we mobilized. We walked 90 miles across Massachusetts, and even though we felt like defeated when he vetoed the bill, through that whole session, we shifted public opinion across racist Massachusetts, and we got people to like see, like, we don't need a new women's prison, and we need community investments, and we can do better. So our support started to just grow rapidly to where when we did a standout at the State House, there was over 200 people standing in front of the State House saying like, nah, we don't need a new women's prison. But then where I was going with this was that when we had our last hearing to continue the moratorium bill through the session, for the first time we had 22 women that, hold on. So the reason why they said that we needed this new women's prison is because all of the women in Framingham said that this prison is horrible and that the women needed better conditions, which we believe the women do deserve better. But I'm also not going to allow DOC, who has allowed women to live in these conditions for so many years, dictate what we need. But that was the narrative that they carried. But then this session, when we had a hearing, we were able to mobilize 22 currently incarcerated women that are in Framingham, and they did a video virtual testimony in the hearing at the State House and allowed all the legislators to see. And all these women that have been incarcerated for decades, I hate calling women lifers because we're gonna bring them home at some point. But you know, all these women who have been incarcerated for a long time was like, no, we don't need a new women's prison. We need different. We need to do different. I don't care how long I'm gonna be in here. Don't build a new women's prison. And that really, the women were so happy to be, they were like, yes. And they was like, yo, we gonna get in trouble because the guards were threatening us to do this video, but I'm gonna let y'all know what guard it was if we get in trouble. And we gonna be right up there fighting for y'all. And they know it too, because we done been up there so many times. But anyway, but that was the beauty of it. And so sometimes we think that like that is not important, but that's important. And you know, we've been talking about that, and it was the first time in the history of Massachusetts that they were allowed to have a camera in there and testify at the hearing for the prison and jail moratorium bill. And so that is what is creating what different looks like, and then uplifting and highlighting and just allowing the women that are currently incarcerated to be the voice of the women that are currently incarcerated. So yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you. How are, in your research, how are currently incarcerated people affecting change? How can we be in support?
So the organization I worked with was actually founded by formerly incarcerated women, as well as like professors and graduate students. And they're the ones that are actually, like you mentioned, saying that we need to be able to meet their needs, what they're asking for. So one of the main issues, so for those of you that don't know, upstate New York, very barren, basically the north or the south of the north. But a lot of these women, when they leave the jail, they're just kind of left on the side of the road. There's no place to go. So they created the Walk With Me reentry program. So they pick up women from the jail.
Walk With Me
reentry program, yes. And so what they'll do, it was ran by one woman who's formerly incarcerated, and now another one has taken over. They pick up the women from the jail. They take them to Social Security to get a new Social Security card. They take them to go get clothing from local churches that partner with us. They take them to go get SNAP benefits and also find housing, even though it's very limited for formerly incarcerated people. They do their best to try to find those things. They get them set up with a cell phone and help them kind of just take as many steps as possible to get them reintegrated back into the community. And then for things that, you also asked things that we can do, and again, I just think that the profound point by listening to them, the women in the jail told us that we are bored. So I focus on jails more so than prisons because I think they're an understudied realm of the mass incarceration pie. I feel like they get lumped in a bit too much. And when you think about jails, they do not have programming. They are literally just sitting there waiting for sentencing, waiting for court, waiting to be transferred to a state prison, or just waiting for their sentence to end, right? And so that is so much dead time. And so a lot of the women mentioned there's nothing to do. So that's why we formed the Book of the Month Club, to make sure that people are getting a book, because they say it means so much to them just to be able to read something and mentally escape the confines, even if they're still physically in that space. Some of the women were telling them that they don't update them on underwear, tampons, pads, or any feminine products. So we started seeding donations from the community to go ahead and send those in to make sure that women are getting these things. Sometimes it makes it in, sometimes it doesn't, but we are trying to bring together those efforts, right? So I think that in the community I'm working in, it's formerly incarcerated women that are paving the way, that are creating space for us to learn and also start doing this work alongside them, and also listening to these currently incarcerated women and all of the needs that they have, and giving them the opportunity to speak for themselves. Like during COVID, there was quite a few protests that we engaged in, and because of technological advancements, how we were able to hear Mumia speak on the phone on the first day, we were able to record some of the women who prepared speeches. They organized amongst themselves inside the jail to say that under these conditions in COVID, where the women were basically housed in the intake pod that were also state ready, which means that women that were actively, had already quarantined and ready to be transferred upstate, even though the New York system had come to a standstill, were being actively exposed to new people coming into the jail who may have COVID, who may not. And again, this is during the social isolation phase. The women organized in their pod saying, hey, this is not okay. They filed joint grievances together. They wrote letters to former disgraced Governor Cuomo and other media affiliates. And then they prepared speeches where we were able to do a video call with them and record that and share that during protests. And it was so beautiful to hear that the police blocked us from getting too close to the jail. But we were so loud that in follow-up video calls, the women said to me, thank you so much. We were able to hear you. And so it's about listening to what they're saying and actually trying to meet those needs in that immediate space, and also letting those who have been formerly impacted by incarceration lead us.
Thank you.
I think you said it, yeah. I would love to send books to you girls. I would love to send books.
We need donations all the time. It's very hard to keep it up.
So. But I think you said it. There is 75 million previously incarcerated people walking around this nation. And we're not buying the hype, all the tough on crime stuff. And we're not leaving our people behind. We understand what they need. We're meeting them at the gate. We're walking them across the bridge. We're standing up to them and showing them how to reach back too. So, yeah, it's just, we gon' free the people. We gonna have freedom. I was buying a house late yesterday when I was sitting up there, so that women have a place to live when they come home.
You bought a house yesterday?
Well, it went into escrow. We put in the offer.
Yes,
Well, we
you
put in an
did.
offer for it to go into escrow, but yeah,
Yes, you
so that women have a place to live when they come home. Yeah. And wow. Before we go questioning an answer with the audience, so we've worked hella hard, all of us, to support people to have a new and different life, to allow children to reconnect with their mothers and support people to be their best selves. And while there's no protest by the general public for us to go into prison, when we come back to communities to live, you say you can't live here. I don't get that. If the time is done, the time is done. We should be able to live anywhere we want to live or can afford to live or are supported to live. We're not going to do anything but what you do in a home is to live there. So all of that about not in my backyard. I could get sassy and say, hey, you want me in your front yard then? That's the other sassy part, right? Yeah. But, that's just a problem. That's a challenge, and I just don't get it. So, we're coming home. 95% of people incarcerated are coming home. And we're coming home to live a good and better life. We're not coming to wreak hell and havoc. We're just coming home to live. And I don't know who can hear this. That's not in this room, but I just want you to take note of that. We're coming home. We have 31 organizations across this nation. We're not coming home to ghettos. We're coming home to good neighborhoods. We're coming home to live. And so I just want to say, we're coming home. And don't be like, I can't live next to you, because I'm free. We're free to live wherever we want to live. So, question and answer, I guess.
We should take a couple questions. I see Lizette over there with the mic. And then, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Katie on this, and maybe we'll go kind of back and, well, we'll see what happens. Because I don't know if there's anybody in the audience right now who has a question. And I'm just, in the interest of time and because we have so many people
Yeah,
here, I'm
it's
going to
gonna be
really
real quick.
encourage people to focus on the question.
Do you want to
part.
cue a few questions and then?
Oh, yeah, that'd be, yeah. We could queue up a couple questions. Okay.
Okay, I just want to say that the prisons for the men and women is a business, and for the women, prisons that makes the Levi jeans, that makes pots for Verizon and all these other companies, but they don't get the same amount of pay before they get out of prison. So my question is there a way that these men and women that do all this industry stuff for the rich and powerful corporations, but getting paid slave labor, slave pay, is there a way to turn that around before they get out of prison, where they have some money in their accounts to help them to be a productive member of society?
Thank you.
Yeah, we know that our labor is being exploited. And there are some people in some states working on legislation. But we know that prisons are in place as an extension of slavery.
And
Oh, I'd just like to also like Ms. Burton said, there is work being done around that, but also encouraging organizations to support mutual aid. I know for the National Council, we started to provide currently incarcerated women basic income, which is $500 a month. And if you're currently incarcerated, for the folks that receive basic income that are in the community, they get the basic income for 1 year. But if you're currently incarcerated, you get it until you come home. And so it also encourages us to continue to fight through avenues like participatory defense, to help bring you home. But also, like you said, allows you to have a cushion when you come home, or even send your kids money, because, we still have to feed our family. Because I know I was still asking my mother for stuff, and my dad. But, just encouraging organizations to also explore avenues like that to support currently incarcerated people, because the system is doing exactly what it was designed to do, which is to cause further harm and keep people oppressed. And so, of course, they would, get profit off of people that are incarcerated. But we have to take care of our people, because we can heal our people. So just encouraging organizations that can do that to explore that avenue.
Thank you. I think there's another question. Yes.
Yes, so I think Ms. Burton, Ella, and I think Sasha as well mentioned that the organizations that you're working for are ran by women who are formerly incarcerated or have a close connection to people who are formerly incarcerated, and have that sort of generational knowledge. And I just wanted to ask the value that you see in working with those organizations when they're led by people with that close, intimate knowledge of the carceral system, as compared to other organizations that have a more sort of like academic look into the system, and how that sort of personal connection benefits the people that you're trying to help.
Thank you.
So for a long time, we really, really, I fought hard to be at the table. I fought hard. I built a table because we needed our authentic voice and our expression in the. I think y'all call it the discourse, in the conversation, right? Yeah. So but it's just important that we lead our movement. You know, the other movements are led by the folks that are authentic to the movement. The LGBT movement is led by LGBTQ people. The movement for immigration is led by immigrants. You know, why wouldn't we be leading our work? And then we had to step up as women because we were left out of the conversation. We were left way behind. When we talked about mass incarceration, it was always about men. When there were services, there was always services for men. The men's visiting room is full. The women's visiting room is empty. So we as women had to step up and lead the way for other women and to build the power and the opportunity for other formerly incarcerated women to be a part in this movement and have opportunity upon release.
And the beautiful things that happens with your organizations too, and the whole network is that, I mean, your goal is not, we're just gonna do this for women and peace out to the 90%, you know, the men are 90% of the people behind bars. But when y'all do work, you do work on behalf of everybody.
The whole community.
And you bring, I mean, I think Trisha Rose the first day asked, you know, why is the movement to free Mumia driven by women, and why does it have like a feminist critique under it? But which I thought she meant by like, why are women bringing this deep understanding to this work about how the carceral system impacts men and women? And it's not just because we're there, but and we're our families, our menfolk, our children are being taken away, but it's because we also see and witness how policing is different vis-a-vis women. Yeah. So, I mean, right now, and we'll get to this lovely lady in the pink right in a second, but that, you know, right now we're in a moment of an inflection point. I mean, the abolition of the Roe v. Wade has opened up a whole new category of offenses that will only impact women in certain states. So if there's a woman right now who, she helped her daughter get an abortion.
2 years.
They found out through Facebook.
2 years.
2 years for helping her child get an abortion that she needed, because why? She gets to have ownership of her own body.
Yeah.
And when we refuse to, interrogate and pay attention to how policing and the courts and the laws operate vis-a-vis on women, then we miss out an opportunity to understand how the whole system works. Because trust me, if they like to experiment on women and girls.
Yes, they do.
There are how many people do we know who had, did not consent to a hysterectomy, but got one behind bars?
Yeah.
Who had their children taken away days, hours after they were born. Yeah. Right? This kind of family separation policy is not an accident. This kind of like medical experimentation, medical abuse, like exploitation of women's reproductive capabilities and the refusal of services, it is not a mistake. Yeah. Yes. It is part of the system. And if we ignore it, we do it to our peril. We put all of our lives in danger. All of our lives are in danger. Oh, that's my sermon for the moment. Yes, ma'am, in the pink.
So I love that you all focus on just getting women what they need in the time now, because I feel like a lot of organizations don't do that. Money is spent very differently. It's important that you have money to get people what they need. So my question is, how do we move the movement and elevate the movement to focus on not locking girls up, but also making sure they get out of jail and prison? Because I feel like the movements, how do we move it more national? How do we get more people involved? And what do you think, ideally, each of you, where do you think the movement should go in terms of like the court accountability, right? Like the courts are the people who are sentencing women. How do we get the movement to court accountability, and how do we get the movement to people focusing on not locking girls up?
Thank you for that.
I think for me, like most of the women I work with are dealing with substance abuse disorder. And I think for me, one of the biggest ways is to decriminalize that completely and actually put in harm reduction spaces such as safe injection sites, places where people can actually learn about substance abuse disorder and how to like mitigate that and how to and if you fall off, right, which it happens, like, you know, anyone dealing with substance abuse disorder who has dealt with substance abuse disorder, you're going to fall off and you're going to come back. But instead of that being a punitive thing, instead of them throwing the book at you as soon as you fall off, which the vast majority of the women I worked with were in for parole violations for having a bag of ice or something along those lines on them. It's about prioritizing harm reduction and care in these spaces where we're not just throwing the book at people who really just need help. And like I think that's what's really different about women's incarceration is that a lot of, as Lisa has said so far, a lot of women are incarcerated for nonviolent crimes, moral crimes, crimes that don't really harm the other public, right? They're more so crimes that maybe, arguably you could say maybe harm themselves, but it's not really causing harm outside of that realm. So how can we support them on the outside? And this is like even from our policing panel earlier, talking about defunding police and actually putting it into community intervention programs, mutual aid projects, or projects that actually meet, as you said, meet the needs of people in this time and in this space before they even get impacted by incarceration, during their impaction by incarceration, and after. This is not just a one-time little intervention and like, oh, you didn't fix it, so back to prison or jail you go, you know? This is a consistent, concerted effort to continually work with these people and make sure that they can find alternatives. So, I don't know.
What I want you to know is that it's growing and it's deepening. You know, we want to look to legislators to make changes. But we have the power of the vote also. We can elect judges. We can unelect judges. We can elect district attorneys. 75 million people formerly incarcerated and their family members. So what I want you to know, and I need the folks out there to know, is that it's growing, and we're organizing, and we're registering people to vote, and we're going to try to make the change. And I say try to make the change, you know, because they told me when I first arrived in Santa Monica, will you just try? And I said, yes, I'll try. So we're still trying. But I've seen so much change over the last 2 decades. I would have never imagined that I would be sitting at Brown University at a symposium about Mamiya. Never, ever. So it is changing. But yeah, we're voting. We're trying to take slavery out of the California Constitution. We're going to put it on the ballot. We're going to win. And then we're going to move to some other places. So we're going to keep hope alive.
Thank you.
I think too, as you just said about slavery, I think the voters here in Rhode Island, you all were able to vote the word plantation out of the name Rhode Island Plantation.
Oh, wow.
And it's sad to say that it had to be put on the ballot in 2020, I believe.
Yeah.
That came down. So change is a little bit slow. I was reminded as you were speaking about the criminalization of women. There was a report, I believe it was back in 2018. It was about Black girls over-policed and underprotected. I believe it was by APHA. And as I sit here, I'm reminded of Sister Marissa Alexander and how, you know, I've heard the stories around the impact and intersections of domestic violence and intimate partner violence and the incarceration of women, and how we watch George Zimmerman use Stand Your Ground and be acquitted, while when Marissa Alexander attempted to stand her ground, she was convicted, sent to jail, and it took a fight to get her released. And so I'm just wondering, in terms of, you know, I think about, like, there was a letter that Mother Assata Shakur wrote on her 60th birthday and talked about, you know, I encourage folks to read it if you haven't read it, and what it was like for her to live under this system. and to be incarcerated, to be shackled, and what it was to watch her baby girl, Kukua, come to visit her and shaking the bars because she thought that, Mom, you're here because you want to be here. Come on, you can get out, and how she watched her just shaking until her body got so tired and she just kind of fell down. And she writes that it's like seeing that moment is when it came to her mind that it's time for liberation.
And the autobiography, she says that when her daughter turned to her and said, "You're not my real mommy. My real mommy would not be in this prison."
Yes.
But see, the thing that you said
Yeah.
also is that it took organizing
Yes.
to get Marissa out.
Yes.
There was a day that we couldn't have organized and got Marissa out.
right.
Yes.
So that's the progress
Yes.
that I'm talking about.
Yeah. And
We're
it's-
not just laying back watching people get
Exactly.
slayed by the criminal justice system.
And
Yeah.
I don't know if you have a particular question or if you
I was just saying
wanted
to echo what Ms. Burton just said, like the power of organizing and how important it is that we must continue. In the words of A. Philip Randolph, he said, pressure, and even more pressure. Because with Mumia's works here at Brown University, I would call on Brown and its establishment to say, what are you going to commit to say Mumia must be free?
Right.
We need to bring Mumia Abu Jamal home and bring home all political prisoners and hands off Assata Shakur.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
We're going to transition into my next question, y'all, as you think about additional, I'm sure there are more hands. I was going to ask, and I'm looking at the time, we have about 15 minutes. Thank you for inviting that question in.
I have a question, perhaps.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't
okay.
see you. Yes,
That's
and then
okay.
I'll get to mine.
That's okay.
I kind of wrap up.
I do a lot of work with sex workers of color, not so much in the US, but I'm wondering if in your work, the issue of the decriminalization of sex work is something that you take up and how it's addressed.
So in my work, I don't take up decriminalizing sex working. I don't think it should be criminalized, but my lane is to help women transition safely out of incarceration and back to the community, supporting them to dream again and do whatever it is that they want to do, to identify that and then support them to do that. But that's not, my work. I know, like there is a lot to be done out here in the field. And I think that identifying and executing what it is that you are called to do is important. So that's my lane.
So I would say, we're an abolitionist organization, and we strongly believe that the system is not going to save us, but that doesn't mean that we can't keep our foot on the system's neck,
Yes.
right. And so our elder has given us the guidance to say, in order for us to end incarceration of women and girls, we have to also, as we're creating this world of what we vision, because the system is still going to be there, we have to create a rack of policies that is going to help us get to our goal of ending incarceration of women and girls. And so that is inclusive of sex decrim, drug decrim, medical parole, elderly parole, primary caretakers, clemency, and really like getting all of those pieces of legislation and advocacy together and operating like a well-oiled machine, so that way in each state, in the moratorium bill, so that way in each state we can start to decriminalize drugs, we can start to decriminalize sex, and we can start to bring medical parole, elderly parole, exploring all those avenues, but really highlighting, like for example, when we're in different states, because we're currently in Vermont, and also in New York, we just got our office space in New York, but like really listening to the ground of like what is happening right now and like Rhode Island. And I'm gonna shout out Rhode Island specifically because Coyote, Rhode Island, I know Bella leads that movement, right? She is leading sex decriminalization of sex. And so how do we support her as we build out that infrastructure? And then we just get that, all right, boom, in Rhode Island, we decriminalize sex, so now we can work to our next piece of legislation. But that is a part of how we really build each other. And then we also use that because
Thank you for saving us up here.
Yeah, right.
See the
No.
young people.
No, but like I was about to give you your roses, Miss Burton. So Miss Burton, she has all of these beautiful houses, and that's all about what different looks like. And so we go to her to figure out like, okay, how are you getting these houses up and running? How are they operating so that way we're not reinventing the wheel? And so tying that into legislation, when we do pass decriminalization of sex in Rhode Island, we already have the legislation right there. The blueprint is right there. So now we can take it to Massachusetts, we could take it to New York, we could take it everywhere. Just like we could take all of the new way of lives everywhere and start building it and implementing it without using the system, because we have got the key. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, sorry if I went off. And then I also wanted to say with you, Pretty in the Pink, that's my favorite color. But also like following that rack of legislation, but also using participatory defense. You know, one of our founders, Justine Moore, she said that if she had participatory defense when she went to prison, she would have never did 15 years. And so that's about empowering the community to support the community. So that way when you go to court, I done been in front of the court system mad times. I'm a probationary felon. That's what they call me or whatever. And that's what they think they're gonna call me. But anyway, you know, and it's like I done been in front of the system as you have, and I don't even know what they're talking about. But when I have participatory defense and I have a community that's sitting with me and like, no, we're gonna break this out, that's how you stop the flow of girls from going to prison, because we got each other. You know, it's not you just fighting the system by yourself. It's no, we fighting the system with you. Yeah.
Can I also say that, I mean, I don't know if there is space for this, but I often, I think about in all the stories that you've shared with us, the history, the knowledge that you shared with us, and your question about women and girls, protecting girls. I think a lot about healing the family. That statistic that I read about 85, that from your book, about 90% of women that before they get to prison, where they're also going to encounter sexualized violence, right? That they are survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. And when I've worked with women behind bars in prison or jail, that is one of the things that is killing them, is that no one believed them when they got up the courage to tell. And that because people didn't believe them, that they didn't protect them. And so, I mean, that is not the reason why they are incarcerated, but there is deep crime, there is deep pain there.
But I talk about it like criminalizing my response to harm.
Yeah.
You know, however I can figure out how I deal with the harm that has happened, continual harm all throughout my life. And then when I lose my son, I just can't hold the harm anymore. And I began to respond with medication. But before that, it was anger.
Yeah.
I was mad. I was mad at what the world had done to a little girl. So yeah, criminalizing people's response to harm instead of resourcing communities in a way that, you know, there's victim centers, there's rape centers, there's parks and arts and recreation, and there's hospitals, and there's, you know, universities, and all of these things that make communities stronger, safer, and healthier. We could do a whole lot with $182 billion for our communities across this nation, right? So yeah, can't get off that number.
Since we're at a university, is there a role for universities in this?
There is a role for universities, and I want to ask Brown a question. Do you have the question, have you ever been incarcerated, on your application? How many folks on your campus have a history of incarceration? And are you actively looking out and reaching out to us to make us a part of your Brown community? There was quite a few questions, I guess, but anybody can take it. You want, anybody can take it, yeah. Do you allow people in the Brown with a criminal history, this beautiful HBCU?
If only it was at HBCU. I mean, I think definitely for faculty and staff, there's a background check and that includes some kind of question about whether or not you have a felony conviction.
For faculty and staff?
For faculty and staff. Having never been a student here, I don't know what the student application says about that. I know that at one point there was an active group on campus tied in with a community called the Formerly Incarcerated Union. And so there were these beautiful ties that were, I don't know, is anybody from Formerly Incarcerated Union in the room today? So, okay. But I know that there were some efforts between formerly incarcerated people here in Rhode Island to make connections with people, but I could not name a student organization personally or an outreach engagement student support effort that specifically is focused upon the needs of either formerly incarcerated young people or people who have survived foster care.
So I just want to say Brown has a role to play in this too. And I want to invite you into the room and say, you all can be a part of this change also. And just being here today is just beautiful. Being here over this period is just beautiful.
Thank you.
But y'all can play too.
Well, I'm gonna.
I also, because schools be getting a lot of money, and there are a lot of children that's in this community that need pathways to go to school. And I live in Roxbury, and so one of my youth girls, she dealt with housing instability for a few years, and then I was like, girl, just come live with me. So she lived with me for a few years, and then, I don't know, I had a toddler and a teenager out of nowhere, and I'm still struggling not to be a teenager.
And you're like 22. You're like a baby.
Yeah, and so, but, she applied, she was a 4.0 GPA, and I took her everywhere with me. She was at the Free Her Conference, Miss Burton on stage last year. And this year, she applied to like 15 schools. Nobody gave her any money. And then we started doing panels and speaking to the schools about and saying her name. Like, this girl, she applied to this school. What's up? And then Northeastern gave her a full ride, and then BU gave her a full ride. And so she's at BU right now. But my point is that there are students that are dealing with housing instability. There are students that have incarcerated parents. There are students that want to get an education. And Brown has the resources. Every school has the resources to provide a pathway for children that are coming out of high school to get a full ride. And even formerly incarcerated folks that want to go to school to get a full ride, they have the resources to do it. And then for the students and the faculty, we can create clemency clinics, we can create research projects. There are a lot of things that, us as organizers, it's hard for us to be on the ground, putting out a fire here, da-da-da-da-da-da, then we over here, now we gotta go over here, and then we gotta type up a 100-page essay, or we gotta go read this million-page whatever. We don't have the capacity to do it all. It's burning us out. And so if if professors can start to implement a lot of the movement into their curriculum, that really could help us as we progress and we create what different looks like. And so I really think that schools should not just like make this a shiny conversation just for the moment, but really figure out, because this is our lifestyle. So like even when I think earlier when you know, one of the people made a comment and said, what is the difference between schools being a part of the movement and then like us being a part of the movement? Like, of course we're gonna fight because this is our family. We're not just showing up just for people that are incarcerated. We're showing up because these is our loved ones. This is like personal. This fight is personal. And so we need to figure out how this fight is personal for us all. It shouldn't be any separation. We gotta be on the same team. And so I feel like schools have the resources, they have the time, they have the curriculum, they have the infrastructure, they have the tools, and they should try to figure out how we can come together as a unity and stop being so segregated.
Brown ain't segregated, is it?
You're gonna get somebody in trouble.
I do that sometimes.
One day I'll show you the published map of where arrests happen in this area for substance-related issues. And it's incredible that there are never arrests on College Hill for substance-related crimes.
That's surprising.
I'm sorry, I think we are at time, unfortunately, but this does not mean it's the last opportunity to speak with the panelists. I'm just seeing that our fearless leader, Amanda Strauss, is there at the podium. So I just want to thank all of you for coming today and to the symposium and for joining me on stage with these dynamic, visionary leaders, thought leaders, leaders on the ground, leaders with your heart. I could not be more humbled and honored to be in your presence.
Let's give a big round of applause for this amazing panel. Thank you all so much. This was such an incredible conversation. I wanted to take a moment to, because of the question of decriminalizing sex work, to shout out the Pembroke Center Archives, which does hold the records of Coyote, Rhode Island, which is a very popular collection and continues to grow as Coyote, Rhode Island continues its activism. That collection continues to be accessed and to grow. So I'm going to excuse our panelists from the stage. Let's give them one more round of applause. We're moving into the very, very final moments of our symposium, and I'm honored that we're going to be joined for some closing remarks by an incredible leader and faculty member here on campus who moves me every time I hear him speak. Our closing remarks for the symposium will be offered by Andre Willis, who is a professor of religious studies here at Brown University. After Professor Willis speaks, we will have a closing invocation by Reverend Delphine Desmontines. Sorry, it's been a long day, Del. And then we will close this wonderful event. Thank you all so much.
Yes, thank you, Amanda. What a wonderful panel. I'll offer some very brief words, kind of the closing gratitude, quite different than an opening gratitude, I think, because on the closing gratitude, you know, you're looking back, considering and reflecting on the witness that you've just been a part of. On the opening gratitude, you know, you're calling people to presence for what's going to come. That's a different kind of energy. And when I look back on what I've witnessed over the course of my presence here and call us into a closing gratitude, and I know Dell's gonna do the invocation, so I'm gonna stay off the spiritual language as much as I can. I feel an extraordinary, we've had an extraordinary experience listening to these deep insights, the profound sharing and the wonderful dialogue and discourse that's come from the panels and the audience. But you know, even though I'm a philosopher of the Enlightenment, which venerates reason as the final arbiter of how we should
process these kinds of things. This for me is an issue of the heart, to go through and hear all of these words, and it just brings me to tears almost, Now, when I think about tears, when I think about these papers, right? So you got Mumia's papers now at Brown University, like any late modern university, corrupt because it has to tell a certain version of itself, right? Even though it now possesses the papers, we want to ensure that those papers are accessible to folk without a Brown ID. I'm sure this has been part of your conversations over there. But I don't think the papers allow themselves to be read without a veil of tears, because Mumia is still behind bars, in a cell, looking at bricks. Now, his spirit's not contained, but we know this process of containment that thinks of Black Americans, particularly those who are descendants of those who were held as slaves, as captives in this very nation. We know that those folk are thought of almost as virus-like in the sense that they're dangerous to society. So they have to be contained, limited, locked down. Why? Well, the answer to that seems to be easy because if you look at all the political prisoners who are still in prison, all of them coming out of a Black freedom tradition, who tried to do what? Who tried to stand in the face of a system that was dehumanizing and denigrating and making their lives more difficult than the lives of their people. And what did they do? They wanted to say, hey, how can we stand up? And what happens when they stood up is they got shut down. But for me, it just hurts. It just fundamentally hurts to go through this. So when Professor Biggs asks us to ground ourselves, and I listened to Sister Sashi, I think it was, and Miss Burton, Sister Ella, and the panel before that with the 4 brave white folks, the clinicians. I'm gonna get back to that. And then that one on policing. All I can do is think about the traps that are out here waiting for so many of us, right? It's very hard to wake up every day as a Black person in the U.S. You have to do something very, very difficult. It's amazing that any Black folks still standing because it's so hard to navigate a system, right? A structure. So it just hurts, right? It's fundamental. But of course, there's 2 kinds of sadness. Variety of pains, right? There's that mobilizing pain, that fire. Gift from Miss Burton. She got fire. She got that fire. Can't hold it down. But then you got that demoralizing pain. And it's okay to have both, right? But we want to leave this. I want to close it with a gratitude that ultimately presses us, that energizes us. So we can push, keep pushing, because Brother Mumia is still behind bars. But again, I said I was thinking about pain, sadness, and tears. When I think about that, I think about my own father. I saw him cry one time. He was always teasing me because I was crying a lot. And the one time I saw him cry, I was about 7, 8 years old, and his father had died. There's something about these Black men, these men who are descendants of folk who are held as captives in this land, right? Something about their masculinity, particularly in his generation, patriarchal masculinity that's challenged by these gender panels that have been so vital for this conference to go through the lens of gender in an intersectional way to help us understand how to address this system. But I saw my father cry that day when his father died, and I was flummoxed. I was like, dang, I just didn't have the interpretive economy to understand what was going on when I saw tears streaming down his face, and he had on sunglasses because he was trying to hide. He didn't want me to see it. Maybe he knew I couldn't understand. But I said, Dad, why are you crying? And he said, there's a time for tears. Now, I don't want to cast too much of a Paul energy over this event, but God, I'm going to have to cry about this sometime, at some point, Not because and I'm going to hit each panel a little bit because some of y'all weren't here. Not because it was, as they said on panel 2 over and over, what did they say? A systemic failure. You see, so a systemic failure, like your lights go out on one side of town, and the electricity's out, so everybody goes through the failure of the lights, right? Electric failure. Systemic failure, okay, if the water is bad in one area, let's say Flint, means the water is going to probably be bad in an area that should likely be connected, like Fenton, which is right next door. Or a system failure is something that, like, when your ID doesn't work at Brown University, we slide IDs through. And the system fails, nobody's ID works. But this system's not failing, y'all. This system is doing exactly what it was constructed to do. That's the sad thing, and that's why black folk got to do something very, very difficult every single day. The system's not failing, it's doing what it was crafted to do. It's diminish and demoralize black folk. Think about all the lives, all the families, all the children, lives cut short by a system constantly coming at them with vicious violence and acts of barbarism and locking folk up, sending them to death row. And this is not just about black folk, but I'm focusing on it because we're talking about an anti-black world. You see? So the premise is an anti-black world, then, black folk constantly under siege. What are we going to do? Well, I mentioned my father because I wanted to not forget. Tell me if I'm going too long. I wanted to not forget that something about growing up in the black family I was in was the ancestors were important. What did they die for? What did they live for? What did they give their time and energy to? You see, and we've heard some of that, how that filters down into the lives of folk who are out here trying to work against systems and structures that are designed to do harm to black and working poor folk. But when you think about the ancestors, you say, well, I think they tried to pass something to us that was more fragile than hope even, just a wish maybe that we could live in a space that would allow us to develop competence and some degree of healthy autonomy in community. That was their wish. And what they left to us was the capacity to fight for that, knowing that the space, the site, America itself, wasn't going to grant us that too easy. But they also told us that while we're fighting against the system, it's important to remember, one, to take care of ourselves. We don't want to romanticize this idea of fighting. Black folk always in battle, We don't want to essentialize black experience or even diminish the capacity of the complexity of the variety of lives of those folk walking around in black and brown earth suits. But what they also taught us was the good always exists in the midst of its betrayals. That's the definition of the good. You don't get good unless you can understand that it's always constantly being worked against, right? So if the good exists always in the midst of its betrayals, that's why Brown University, like any late modern university, as I said, is corrupt, is able to, get the papers, doing good in the midst of its betrayals, right? Like myself, our communities, Brown University always does too much and not enough. Constant late modern paradox, not only of institutions, but of our own existential predicament. We're doing too much, we're doing not enough. But we got to keep going. Let me quickly go through these panels because I know I'm supposed to close this down. Where's my program? Oh, here it is. Panel 1, we talk about policing. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to do this, but just a quick synopsis if you missed it. Oh, that was a deep one. That was a deep one, y'all. Because we had some marvelous insight from the panelists, but themselves straddling a system that they know is designed to do harm, but trying to find spaces for care inside of it, right? Struggling, but those spaces are there. Those spaces are there because that's how structures function. When you're in the midst of polycrisis, which is what we're in, then you look for the creases, right? You look for the fractures. You look for fragments you can do to get in there, like this Sister Burton there. Just give her enough space and she can carve something out of it and push back. That's what they're trying to do. Same thing with panel number 2, but that policing panel, that hit me because it looked like there's no way out as long as the police exists that we're going to be safe. Y'all, that's what I took from it. But then I said, wait a minute. I don't want to be too negative about this because my cousin's a policeman. And I know he out in LA. And I know he's a loving brother trying to do his best in the midst of a system which is organized and oriented to help bring out the worst parts of him. I'm glad I don't work in a space where the worst parts of myself get venerated, right? So I feel for some of them police. And the panel up here was just quite dynamic. But again, it led me to some deeper questions. And when those brave clinicians came out in panel number 2, whew, that was deep though. Because what they're saying is they're going into the system, into the complex, into the buildings. And I teach at prisons when the students drag me out there. Rhode Island College has a course. We go out, teach Black history. And they said they go in there every week. Brother Jody, go in there every week trying to do healthcare in a space that is designed to undermine the very care he's providing. So why are you doing it, Jody? It's the kind of commitment we need, though. It might not be clear, but he understands himself as helping. And I think I agree because, again, there's a crease. He can get in there, give some service, some care, some compassion to some folk who are suffering. And then we had these final, and I'm going to sit down, this final panel, which most of y'all heard, because I think you were here. But what a joy it was. What a joy it was to hear about the work going on right now. And bringing that to this audience leaves me feeling inspired. Remember I told you, sadness is broad range of pain. If it can mobilize and not demoralize, then we're getting somewhere. And I think that last session sets us off to do what? To mobilize right now. We got the poor people moving in Rhode Island. We got all kinds of places we can go. They've been passing out the literature. Folks been talking about it. We can mobilize. We can organize. We can be good friends. We can be good partners. We can learn how to care for ourselves. Be good to ourselves, right? And we can affirm the good work, even in the midst of its own betrayals, that's coming out of our own lives and coming out of Brown University. And I salute Amanda Strauss and this library staff for doing what they've done here, which is tremendous. So I'm going to sit on down. God bless y'all. Peace.
Dr. Willis, that was amazing. Amanda, next time, put me first. I can't follow this. For me, this conference has truly been a source of true inspiration, bringing people together, people who are dedicated, united in the mission to end incarceration. I'm deeply honored to have the privilege to offer the invocation, the closing invocation. And I have words of gratitude first and foremost to God, and I have words of gratitude to Amanda, to Dr. West, and to all the organizers. And if it's not out of my place, I grew up in the church, and I want to give due where due is needed. Would you guys mind joining me in thanking the organizers and all who labored to put this conference together? And that goes for those who are in the panels, those who work behind the scene that you don't get to see, but nonetheless, they worked for a long time. So thank you to all of you. During this conference, I found myself reflecting on a few fundamental beliefs that resonated deeply with me. And that is, first and foremost, the interconnectedness of all people, the value of all people, the idea that each person has value and dignity, whether they are incarcerated or not. And with the interconnectedness of all people, I firmly believe that no one person exists in isolation. We are all interdependent on one another. Our actions, whether good or bad, ripple through our individual lives and the lives of others. Thus, one person's action can serve in a good way as a catalyst to dismantling systemic injustice that affect not only them, but also those within their sphere of influence. Individuals have the power to make a meaningful differences in the well-being of others, even when they are the first to take the necessary stance or action. And then I find myself reflecting on the agency that all of us have. Each of us can contribute to end mass incarceration in our own way, starting with small steps, using our existing resources and abilities. As we act, you might be the first one to lay the first brick, but rest assured that more resources and more allies will join you in the journey. And so as we leave this gathering, let us carry this responsibility of our collective knowledge that mass incarceration is complex, demands diverse voices, backgrounds, and expertise. Beyond insight, it requires collective commitment to pursue justice, to help those in need, to support and advocate for the defenseless, including the incarcerated. Now, no matter what role you play in society, let us depart with renewed purpose, committing to dismantle unjust structures and creating a fairer and more compassionate society. Now, may we leave with the commitment and the wherewithal to spread peace and love, and where there may be hatred and conflict. May God blessing and envelop you, your family, and communities as you return home to continue the work of justice, the work for justice. May the presence of God and the support of colleagues and friends be with you always. Amen.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for your time and your attention. I closed yesterday by naming our event staff, and I want to take one quick moment to further those thanks and thank all of our media staff who have worked really hard. Jake, Paul, Mike, Peter, DJ, and even more folks behind the scenes. Thank you for traveling from far and from near to participate in this momentous event. And may you leave inspired, and as Del just said, with renewed purpose to continue the work of justice and transformation. From the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. Please come to the John Hay Library and consult Mumia's papers and other papers. We are open to the public. It will be a joy to see you there. Be well.